You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Mimecast. You're wondering if you need more email and collaboration security, because, as it turns out, just protecting your workspace with M365 isn't good enough. You just watched your entire company grind to a screeching halt, all because someone opened a phishing email. Next time, don't rely on one-size-fits-all security. Protect your inbox with Mimecast and diversify your security stack. For a free trial, go to mimecast.com and keep your business from, falling apart. JokerSpy afflicts Macs. ThirdEye not so blind. Mockingjay process injection as proof of concept. Switzerland expects Russia to increase cyberespionage as agent networks are disrupted. The fracturing of Conti and the rise of its successors. Washington Post's Tim Starks explains the security of undersea cables. Our guest is Brian Johnson of Armorblox to discuss Social Security Administration impersonation scams. And the UserSec Collective says it's recruiting hacktivists for the Russian cause. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Wednesday, June 23rd, 2023. A new Mac malware called JokerSpy was used in an attack on a prominent Japanese cryptocurrency exchange, according to researchers at Elastic. The malware was partially analyzed by Bitdefender earlier this month. Ars Technica notes that there appear to be versions of the malware that target Windows and Linux machines as well. Elastic states, "While we are still investigating and continuing to gather information, we strongly believe that the initial access for this malware was a malicious or backdoored plugin or third-party dependency that provided the threat actor access. This aligns with the connection that was made by the researchers at Bitdefender, who correlated the hard-coded domain found in a version of the sh.pi backdoor to a tweet about an infected macOS QR code reader, which was found to have a malicious dependency." Researchers at Fortinet have observed a new Infostealer they're calling ThirdEye. The malware isn't sophisticated, although its developers are actively making improvements. Fortinet says the ThirdEye Infostealer has relatively simple functionality. It harvests various system information from compromised machines, such as BIOS and hardware data. It also enumerates files and folders, running processes and network information. Once the malware is executed, it gathers all this data and sends it to its command and control server. And unlike most other malware, it does nothing else. So, ThirdEye stays focused. Researchers at Security Joe's outline a process injection technique they've dubbed Mockingjay. The researchers were able to use a vulnerable DLL in Visual Studio 2022 Community that has a default read-write-execute section on disk. They write, "In this case, we were able to inject our own code into the memory space of the ssh.exe process without being detected by the EDR. The uniqueness of this technique lies in the fact that there is no need to allocate memory, set permissions, or create a new thread within the target process to initiate the execution of our injected code. This differentiation sets the strategy apart from other existing techniques and makes it challenging for endpoint detection and response systems to detect this method. It's not out in the wild, but security teams should take note." Switzerland's Federal Intelligence Service warns that Russia can be expected to turn to cyberespionage as its human intelligence networks in Europe and North America are increasingly rolled up, and as the officers working under diplomatic cover who run those networks are declared persona non grata. In their statement, they say, "While the Russian intelligence services which operate abroad continue to pose the main threat in terms of espionage, Their capabilities were undermined in many European states and in North America in 2018, response to the attempted murder of Sergei Skripal, and in 2022, response to the war against Ukraine, in some cases significantly. Large numbers of Russian intelligence officers working under diplomatic cover were expelled. So, cyberespionage can serve as a compensatory measure when traditional espionage operators are expelled or otherwise denied access. The Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime released a report detailing the Conti cybercrime group's fall from its prominent perch in the underworld following the gang's declaration of support for Russia in the Ukraine-Russia war, stating, 2 days after Conti pledged their support for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, things began to unravel for the group. A Twitter profile with the handle @ContiLeaks started leaking the ransomware group's internal communication. Although there are conflicting reports on who was behind the leak, perhaps a Ukrainian security researcher or an affiliate against the war, the over 100,000 leaked files were dubbed the Panama Papers of ransomware. Over the coming months, Conti's methodical and businesslike approach disintegrated, although attacks continued, including on the networks of the Costa Rican state. On May 19, 2023, it was reported that Conti's websites were no longer working. The story doesn't seem to end there, however. IBM's Security X-Force reported on June 27th that their tracking of the cryptors who worked with Conti revealed that the group remains active, at least in fragmentary or rump forms. IBM states, 1 year on, ITG-23, Conti, has experienced many organizational changes, splintering into factions and forging new relationships. Despite these events, ITG-23 cryptors remain fundamental to tracking post-ITG-23 factions and their activity, so much so that we believe identifying and tracking the cryptors is just as important, if not even more so, than tracking the malware itself. Our research indicates that while ITG-23 may have fractured apart after shutting down Conti, many of its various members continue to be very active, still communicating amongst themselves and using shared infrastructure. Conti has fractured into what they call factions, which X-Force calls out as Royal, Quantum, Xeon, Black Basta, and Silent Ransom. Conti has provided a case study in cyber privateering, a financially motivated criminal gang tolerated and encouraged to make its money attacking the enemies of the state. No formal letter of marque and reprisal required, just a wink and a nod from the FSB. And finally, we turn from cyber privateers to cyber auxiliaries. The group calling itself UserSec has reported on its Telegram page that the group has formed a new group of pro-Russian hacktivists. Take what follows with the customary grain of salt. Calling it with a sad failure of imagination the UserSec Collective, they boast to have attracted groups from Russia, India, Egypt, and other countries supporting the Russian cause. They also claim to have already carried out a mass cyber attack against many internet service providers, the details of which remain unreleased. A full list of the groups in the collective was posted this morning. That list is implausibly large. It includes 15 hacktivist groups and one media organization, someone called the Quantum Stellar Initiative, which sounds like a tabloid from the Marvel Universe. The UserSec Collective has so far claimed an attack against a French government visa site. Again, view the communiques with appropriate skepticism. The UserSec Collective is as likely to represent grassroots hacktivism as Anonymous Sudan is to be either anonymous or Sudanese. Off to the salt mines. Coming up after the break, the Washington Post's Tim Starks explains the security of undersea cables. Our guest is Brian Johnson of Armorblox to discuss Social Security Administration impersonation scams. Stay with us. Dreamport is a mission accelerator that combines state-of-the-art facilities, innovative programs, and imaginative people charged with finding that spark that leads to unparalleled capability. Headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, Dreamport was created through a partnership intermediary agreement with U.S. Cybercom, awarded to Missy in May 2018. For more information, please visit dreamport.tech.
Arm your team with the latest news and trends in the evolving cybersecurity landscape with CyberWire Pro Enterprise. Our unlimited pro content will allow you and your team to accelerate and sustain cybersecurity awareness and knowledge. Get access to searchable and accessible news in cybersecurity, business, policy, privacy, disinformation, and more. Find out about our education and military discounts by inquiring at thecyberwire.com/pro.
Security firm Armorblox recently published research tracking a campaign targeting a large educational institution with emails pretending to be from the Social Security Administration. Brian Johnson is Chief Security Officer at Armorblox.
What we saw from our customer base is we have an educational customer where we saw about 160,000 attempts tend to be the Social Security Administration, which is everybody in the U.S. has access with and communications with. And even if you're external to the states coming in, especially in the education space, everybody deals with this administration. So it was an interesting thing to see that somebody was, pretending to be them and to, attack the student body of this educational space.
Well, I'd like to dig into the two elements of this. I mean, it sounds like there's a social engineering side, but then also a technical side. Is it correct that on the tech side, they were able to bypass some of the normal native email security?
Yes. This really, bypassed what we'd consider the standard legacy, detection methodologies. This didn't have, a link that could be easily identified as, something that's known bad. And these were very scripted, pointed attacks, at these, individuals. It had people's names. It looked very official. And what they were really trying to get is that interaction, with the email, so they could, show that there was, some issue, some, speed of action you needed to take to not have something bad happen, and to, hurry and, call us and we'll fix whatever is broken, right? So, that need that they really pushed on the human element of it, was what they were trying to get through. They bypassed everything that we would consider, coming from a known bad host. Like I said before, knowing, a link in the system, pretending to be coming from stuff. They used none of those type tactics. They used good spoofing and the good human engineering to have this attack move forward.
Is it fair to say that they were fairly sophisticated in their methods here? Or would it pass a quick look to make it seem like it came from the Social Security Administration?
This email looked extremely legit. Even when we first started looking at it and it came up and, our detections team sent it to me and we were, discussing it. We were all really surprised about how well this email looked, from the watermarking they put in the system to how they had the official, Social Security Administration seal, address, phone numbers. This looked, extremely legit.
And so did you find that there were many people who ended up falling for it?
There were a number of people who ended up falling for it. With this attack, this phishing type tactic, the dedication of this attack was to call the phone number. We'll never know how many people actually ended up calling the phone number. We do know the number of people who called and said, "Hey, I did call it." It's, for this educational space, we were able to stop the email, stop the attack. It didn't move forward. Unfortunately, the school is the only space being attacked. So I'm sure this was widespread, not just aimed at just this one educational facility, but probably many.
And so what are your recommendations here in order for folks to better protect themselves against this sort of thing?
So I think the thing people really need to understand is the adversaries are increasing their attacks, their complication of the attacks. The way we used to just look at an email and kind of know inherently that it was bad isn't something we can do anymore. We need to use the latest techniques, our natural language ability to help those things and to find those adversaries is really what you need now. The bad guys aren't using links anymore. They're not using kind of those traditional, what we consider in the industry, traditional views and attack methodologies. They're using very pinpointed phishing and interactions to get you to call, to get you to sign up for something, to get you to interact in ways that we don't consider normal yet.
Yeah, it's interesting the degree to which these things are blended now. It's not just a technical solution that's going to get you here. There's that human element as well.
Right, and this human element, is being technically generated. We've really, come to a new time. There's been lots of talk of, how machine learning and AI is, changing the space. This is one of those areas that we've seen change, over the last 5 years. Armorblox, we've been using those, newer detection and machine learning AI based methodologies for detection to find those adversaries because, for everything that's good, somebody will find a bad way to use it. This being no different. So we're really moving into that next phase of what those attacks are going to look like.
How does an attack like this compare to some of the other things that you all see? At 160,000 end users, where does that sit on the spectrum of things?
For us, it is a subset of, data that we see. We see these attacks, every day, every week. We see them much like what we consider in marketing campaigns as they roll them out. We're starting to see trends of really smaller businesses, smaller financial companies, medical device spaces, really becoming, the precursor to these attacks. That's where we're showing kind of the beachhead from. Once they've found that beachhead and found an attack that works, and you see these larger attacks like we saw with this one for the Social Security Administration, where they went and attacked a very large, school. The 160,000 mailboxes is very loud. It's not 5 or 6 in a space. So they had to have 40-some re-education that knew this attack was going to work or had worked somewhere else.
That's Brian Johnson from Armorblox. And joining me once again is Tim Starks. He is the author of the Cybersecurity 202 at the Washington Post. Tim, it's always great to welcome you back.
Always, always.
So interesting article and analysis you posted today. This is a fun one. And it's titled Sharks, Earthquakes, and Cyber Attacks, The Threats to Undersea Cables. What prompted you to take on this topic, Tim?
I think it was just an excuse to write that headline.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
No. Sometimes, what is it? Necessity is the mother of invention. Is that the phrase?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a slow week on the cyber front, and Congress is not around, and that always makes things go slower because everybody's on vacation. And I was looking for things to write about, and I saw that recorded future report in my email inbox, and was like, I've never written about this before. I remember that there was a story that I edited last year about a cyber attack that the Homeland Security Investigations Unit of DHS had said they foiled against an underwater cable.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? Who? What? Why? How? Who's attacking that? What would they do with it? And so I thought it was interesting at the time, and I saw that report. I'm like, you know what? This is interesting. The report essentially says that the threats to those cables are rising, and it's something that has, when I started digging into it a little bit, I was like, this is really fascinating. I want to write about this because it's something that people don't think about probably very much. Right. I don't. I mean, they're underwater and I don't see them and I don't think about them. But when you think about how vital they are, and you look back and see that there's been a lot of decent scholarship about this, that there's real threats to these things, and that could be really damaging to the internet. It could be surveillance issues. This is really compelling. I was like, I got to write about this.
So to what degree does the internet rely on these underwater cables to do its thing?
Yeah, so depending on what estimate you read, minimum of 95% of the intercontinental global internet traffic, minimum. The Recorded Future report, 95% is what I think ODNI said, the Office of Director of National Intelligence said back in 2017. the recorded future report says 99%. So it's almost all of it is the essential answer.
Yeah. And we're talking fiber optic cables here primarily is what's carrying this traffic?
I believe so, yeah. There's a pretty long section in the recorded future report, if you click on the story, that describes the cables and what they physically are. I skipped over that a little bit in my head because I was really more interested in focusing on the nature of the threat.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into that. What are the threats we're talking about here?
Sharks. And of course earthquakes. And of course earthquakes. And of course cyber attacks, which is what I was interested in to start with.
Let's start with sharks. What do sharks have against underwater cables?
What is it exactly, right? We've got a lot of hostilities from sea creatures lately, right? We've got the orcas attacking the boats.
Right.
They just don't like us in general. So there are a lot of threats to these undersea cables that are very incidental. They're natural threats, like, of course, also earthquakes, tsunamis, right. Anything you can think of that might physically affect these things is out there. And to be clear, the physical threats are more common than the cyber threats. So I don't want to overplay this, but if you're talking about, and the ODNI report had an interesting section where they ranked things by where the threat was. And if you're talking about threats to undersea cables that are above ground, it's actually in these kind of network management companies that help operate, manage, protect these undersea cables, and those are the things that would be hacked. You're not going to go underwater and hack something down there. Right. You would hack the company that's managing the system.
What about for espionage? I mean, do we have cases? It seems like this would be something that someone would love to pull a submarine up next to and tap into if they could.
Yes, that is something that the report does go into. That's interesting. There's a couple different ways that there might be a surveillance threat. One would be, first off, China is developing a lot of undersea cables these days, Chinese companies. And so, if you have one of those cables running into your country and it's Chinese managed or operated, you've got to consider the fact that China might be spying on you through it. The other way it might work is the landing stations where you might insert hacking for surveillance kind of technology. Mm-hmm. And there's a country, I can't remember which one it is from the report, there were rumors that were circulating in that country that Indian intelligence was trying to get an implant into one of those landing stations in one of those countries. To the degree that it was truthful or not truthful, the government was not answering the questions about it. So there's reason to suspect that might actually be a real thing. What we've also seen that the report talks about is Russia seems to be very interested in mapping these undersea cables these days. So you have to wonder why they would be interested in doing that.
Yeah, the internet is sort of famously resilient and redundant. Do these cables go down as a matter of routine and things get routed to other cables?
They do go down sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's not that damaging. With some of the more routine things that happen, maybe it'll slow down the internet traffic. We are also seeing, interestingly, that a lot of companies in the United States are investing in these things as well. So I think they mentioned Meta, Facebook, Microsoft. Some of the companies you might expect are starting to develop these cables for themselves. So they're interested in this business as well.
And what is the regulatory regime here? Is this one of those things where you get 20 miles offshore and it's the Wild West?
I mean, one of the things that other reports talked about, not this particular one, delved into the fact that there's not much regulatory protection for them as far as it goes with cyber attacks. The United Nations has talked about these are things you should do to protect them physically. The United States does have. I'm trying to remember what they call themselves. I think it's a Department of Justice unit, telecom team or something like that, mm-hmm. That has shut down some of these attempts to operate cables into the United States or out of the United States. But yeah, it's a little bit of the Wild West is the answer.
Yeah. It's an interesting article for sure. And I should mention also that for the next day or so, the paywall is down at the Washington Post. So this is a great time to go check out and collect and download all those articles you've been meaning to read that have been paywalled.
Yeah, and it's one of the, just to be a little bit of a salesman, I completely agree with everything you're saying. Also, should be known that if you are a person who subscribes to the Cybersecurity 202, it is free in your inbox every day. But if you want to read old stuff, if you want to go back and see articles that we've written, and you just do Google searching and happen across something, you probably need to pay.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim Starks is the author of the Cybersecurity 202 at the Washington Post. Tim, thanks for joining us. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific data criminals have in hand from Infostealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by our editorial staff. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Never miss a thing with CyberWire Pro. Stay cyber aware by getting access to all our public podcasts, ad-free, as well as our exclusive CyberWire Pro podcasts, briefing, articles, and events by becoming a CyberWire Pro subscriber. Get actionable reporting, analysis, and insights on global events occurring in the cybersecurity industry at your fingertips. Visit thecyberwire.com/pro to subscribe today. Hello, listeners. We're always looking for ways to improve the CyberWire network to give you an intelligence-driven news experience that saves you time and keeps you in the know on the latest developments in cybersecurity. We'd like to hear your feedback in our 2023 audience survey. Complete this survey for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Visit thecyberwire.com/survey. That's thecyberwire.com/survey and share your feedback. Thanks.